do certain things, position yourself in certain ways, more times than not, you'll win. When something's rational and you understand how the game's played and you get good at playing the game, you can win much more often than when a market or something is irrational. So there is some optimism, some reason to be optimistic that it is possible, and more than possible, it's likely to have a fair amount of success, financial success in the used car department, but we have to really have a clear-eyed understanding of how the market works, and then we have to be prepared to position ourselves appropriately and execute on the new rules of today's market. So, what I've come to understand is that in order to give you the opportunity that you deserve, to have the type of financial outcomes you expect, at all times, we have to create and maintain 4 essential conditions in our used vehicle inventory. There are 4 essential conditions that we have to create and maintain at all times to give ourselves the opportunity to have the type of financial outcomes that we expect and deserve. Now notice I said the opportunity, not the guarantee, because unfortunately, even if you at your dealership have these 4 conditions present at all times in your used vehicle inventory, alone they do not guarantee you the type of outcomes you deserve, because you still have to do about 1,000 things right in addition to having these 4 conditions in place. You still have to do the basics of proper advertising and merchandising, blocking and tackling, the meeting, greeting, qualifying, prospecting, following up. You still have to be good at all that other stuff. But even if you are really good at all that other stuff and you don't have these 4 conditions in place at all times, at best, you can only expect to have hit and miss financial results. And that's what makes it a challenging business. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, and you got to put a lot of the pieces in place in order to get the whole picture to turn out. But again, what I've come to understand is that at the center of that puzzle that are these 4 essential conditions of used vehicle inventory that we're going to talk about here today. So the first of these 4 essential conditions that are our responsibility as professional managers to create and maintain in our used vehicle inventory at all times are vehicles that possess what I call a proper market day supply. A proper market day supply, not to be confused with your dealership's day supply of inventory. This is the market day supply of your current used vehicle inventory. Mathematically, the way we define the market day supply of a vehicle is you take the current supply of that vehicle in the market and you divide it by its average daily retail sales rate over the past 45 days. So let's say, for example, we're considering a vehicle for stock, and there's 10 of them like it in the market right now. And ones like this one over the past 45 days have been selling on average retail 1 a day. You divide that travel rate of 1 into the supply of 10, and you get what we call a 10-day market day supply. Now, another way of thinking about that 10-day market day supply is that if no new ones came into the market, but they only continue to sell at the current pace, in 10 days there'd be no more of them like them in the market. That's another way of thinking about it. Now, with that basic understanding of this metric, market day supply, you all have to make decisions every day in that used vehicle operation, many decisions. But among the 3 most critical decisions you have to make every day are as follows. Number 1, what cars will I stock? Number 2, how much should I be prepared to pay to acquire those cars for inventory? And number 3, how proud of those vehicles should I be when I go to price them? What cars, what money, what price are among the 3 most critical decisions you make every day? Now, if somebody said to me, Dale, you have to make those decisions of what you're going to stock, how much you're going to pay, and how you're going to price them, but you could only know one fact and one fact only. You can only have one piece of information to make those critical decisions. Let me tell you, for me, what I would not ask to know. I would not ask to know the vehicle's brand. I would not ask to know my dealership's past sales history with that type of car. I wouldn't even ask to know the condition of the car. And that's not to say those things don't matter. I know they do. But if I could know just one fact and one fact only to best know whether I want to own it, how much I'd pay for it, and how I'd price it, I would say, tell me it's market day supply. Now, that would be for me, not the only thing I'd really ever want to know, but the single most important thing I'd want to know. And yet, for many of you, perhaps, you or people back at your dealerships, possibly are making those critical decisions of what cars, what money, what price, and perhaps market day supply is nowhere in their conscious decision-making process. Or if it is anywhere in the conscious decision-making process, it might not play the important role that I believe it should play. So what is it about this thing called market day supply that for me, again, well, it's not the only thing I really want to know, it's the single most important thing I have to know. What is it that makes it so for me? Well, what I understand is this, that the used vehicle market in which we do business today has undergone a fundamental, a radical transformation over the past decade or so as a result of the internet. And I mean a radical transformation. And the nature of the transformation that has occurred is one that an economist would characterize as a transformation from an inefficient to an efficient market. From an inefficient to an efficient market. So what's the definition of an efficient market? It's simply any market where buyers and sellers know the same information. When buyers and sellers have the same knowledge about things like choices and value and alternatives, you have what is classically deemed to be an efficient market. Now with that definition, I ask you this question. Do you think before the internet came along and really took hold as it has in the past decade or so in the used car market, do you think before that this used car business of ours was an efficient market? No, it was wonderfully inefficient. That's what made the used car business for so long the wonderful business that it was. That's what made it different than our new car business. Before the internet, when somebody fell in love with one of our used cars, we always knew way better than they knew what its value was. You know, we knew better than they knew how many more like ours might have been found around town if they'd only bothered to shop or shop a little bit longer. But is that our reality today? No. Today, when somebody falls in love with one of our used cars, they often know as well as we know what its value is, and they almost always know better than we know where they can find another one just like ours if we're not willing to meet their demands. That is the efficient market in which I'm talking about. Okay? So you got to understand that we have today an efficient market. And as such, the rules of the game have changed. And here's what's really interesting to me. All of you, and I mean 100% of you all, are experts in understanding and applying principles of an efficient market. And what are those principles of an efficient market? Well, anytime you do business in any efficient market, whether you're a buyer or a seller, whether you realize it or not, you can predict in advance who's going to win and who's going to lose. Who's got the upper hand in any efficient market is completely predictable. And you know what it's predictable based on? Supply and demand. Supply and demand will always tell you in advance in any efficient market who's going to win, who's going to lose, who's got the upper hand between a buyer and a seller in any efficient market. Now, what's interesting to me, as I just said, is that all of you are experts in understanding principles of supply and demand in managing inventories at your dealerships. But you know where your expertise tends to lie? Not so much in the used car department, where you all are experts in understanding and applying principles of supply and demand, is managing inventory in your new car department. Yeah, in your new car department, you all are experts. You want a little bit of proof of that? When your telephone rings and on the other end of the line is your factory rep, and the only words out of their mouth are, I need you to do me a favor. You know exactly what's coming. They want you to take cars. What kind of cars are they want you to take? Yeah, high supply, low demand. Or in our velocity language, we would call those high market day supply cars. Now, when that request comes in, do you need any coaching or help from me or anyone else to know how to respond? No. You guys know exactly how to respond. You say, no, I don't want those cars. I can't take them. I don't need them. And why? Because every single bit of experience that you have ever had operating in the efficient new car market has taught you the penalty that gets put upon you when you find yourself in possession of a lot full of new cars that have high supply and low demand. And when you do find yourself in that unfortunate situation, as you sometimes do, never in a million years would you reach into your wallet, pull out your hard-earned after-tax dollars, hand it over to lovely people at Auto Trader or Cars.com and say, here, please take my money and advertise these high supply, low demand new cars to my market for over the money. But But you want to know something? That is exactly what you do today on the used car side. And I can prove it to any single one of you. Any single one of you. I could show you used vehicles in your inventory today that you've gone out purposely and perhaps even proudly and purchased in the last 10 days that have extraordinarily high supply and low demand, and yet you are paying us to advertise those cars to your market for over the money. That's right. Now, why in the world would any rational person do such a ridiculous thing on the used car side of their business when they would never in a million years dream of doing such a thing on the new car side? Why is that? Well, here's what I've come to understand. You see, it's only been in relatively recent times, like the last decade, and some people would even say maybe the last 5 to 7 years, that the internet has really taken hold as it has in the used car shopping process. It's only been in relatively recent times that the used car market has become an efficient market. And you see, when a market is not efficient, principles of supply and demand don't govern, don't matter. So literally, if we were having a used car best practice meeting 10 years ago, maybe even 7 years ago, you know what? We never would talk about this thing called market day supply, because market day supply of a used car didn't matter. But you see, today, as your used car market has become efficient and becomes more efficient every day, whether you realize it or not, the market day supply of your inventory has a direct correlation to the financial outcome of the department. Every bit as much as you know it's true on the new car side of your operation. And let me remind you how much you know market day supply matters on the new car side. Let me remind you of what you already know. For a few moments, put on your new car hat. And if I tell you guys something you don't believe 100%, call me out. Is it not true that the day the factory transport arrives at your dealership, carrying those very special new cars, you know, the ones I'm talking about right now that are coming off that transport that are very special are that way because they're the first ones like them to hit the market, and people have been waiting for a long time. In other words, high demand, short supply. Or now in our velocity language, we'd call those low market day supply new cars coming off the truck. Isn't it true that the very day vehicles like those arrive at our dealership, we're often not surprised that people show up, buy them, and take delivery the very day they arrive? Like, how did they know those cars were going to be here today? We didn't even know they were going to arrive today. It's if they followed the transport to the dealership. It seems magical, but you know what? It's actually not magical at all. It's natural. You see, the first natural benefit that inures to any seller in any efficient market when they have a privilege of representing an item that possesses that special quality of high demand and short supply is that the cost of acquiring the sale goes down, sometimes to zero. And you know that's true if you just think about it in the context of your new car efficient market experience. And then the second benefit of having low market day supply new cars, high demand, short supply, you also know to be equally as true, is that the vehicle becomes less sensitive to price competition, right? When that customer comes in that high demand, short supply new car, low market day supply, and says, so what kind of deal can you make me? You can look those people in the eye respectfully and say, I'm sorry, I can't give you any discount. And then what do they say? Oh, okay, all right, let's go ahead anyhow. When is the only time we ever get away with saying to a shopper, no discount? The only time it ever works is when we have that amazing privilege of representing a new vehicle that possesses that wonderful quality of low market day supply. And in fact, I'll go one step further and say that the sole basis upon which you value a new car franchise has nothing to do with its country of origin, nothing to do with the fuel efficiency of its engines. It's purely based on the market day supply of its inventory. You know, you'll pay the moon to own a new car franchise that has vehicles of high demand and short supply. You'll try avoiding owning those franchises that have inventories of high supply and low demand. So you see, you know what I'm telling you is true about the benefits of having low market day supply new car inventory and the correlation between that low market day supply and the financial outcome and the volume and the gross and the enjoyment of operating that new car department. The only thing I'm asking you to accept today is that same correlation exists on the used car side between the market day supply of your used car inventory today and the likely volume, gross profit, and enjoyment you'll derive from operating the used car department. It's no different today. You see, interestingly, if I don't know anything about you, if I don't know where you're located, if I don't know what kind of operator you are, if I don't know what kind of franchise you have, I don't even know if you have a franchise. If I just know one thing and one thing only about your operation, and that is the market day supply of your used car inventory, I can predict with a high degree of certainty how much volume, gross profit, net profit, and enjoyment you'll derive from that department. It's like the difference between having a hot franchise on your used car lot and a cold franchise. But you see, it did not used to be that way until relatively recent times. Since the internet has come along, it did not used to be that way on the used car lot. So what I say very respectfully to dealers today is that if you don't fully understand and appreciate the meaning, the importance of market day supply of used vehicle inventory, then you don't understand the most basic fundamental of today's used car business. The market day supply of a vehicle, the market day supply of your inventory is foundational to its success, just as you know it's true on the new car side. Every bit as much as you know it to be true on the new car side. So why do you all know it so well on the new car side? Because for decades, the new car market has been efficient. For decades, companies have been publishing dealer invoice prices and dealer rebates, and for years people have walked into our new car showrooms having a pretty good idea of what they should pay for our new car based on what we paid for it. They certainly know where to find an identical one to ours if we're not willing to meet their demand. So you see, we all grew up in a very, very efficient new car market, and consequently from our earliest days in the new car department, we learned the importance and understanding the value of the supply and demand of the new car inventory. But again, it's only been in relatively recent times that we now have come to learn and know that that same relationship exists between the market day supply of our used car inventory and the likely financial outcome of the used car department. Any questions about that? Does that make sense to you?
How do you define your market?
Well, your market, from a geographic standpoint, I think it depends on a number of variables, like the density of your market. I mean, you guys have a pretty dense market out here. And how far in this environment, this tri-state area, how far does somebody have to go to find multiple cars just like your used car? The answer is probably not very far, maybe 50, perhaps 100 miles at best. But if you're out in the middle of Arkansas, the market day supply, or the relative market, to find comparable vehicles to yours could be easily 250 miles. So I think it has a lot to do with the density of the population of your market. I think it has to do with how difficult or easy it is for people to travel distances. I think it has a lot to do with how many, on a particular vehicle, how far somebody has to go to find a handful of comparable vehicles to shop with. Question, I think, fundamentally is how much difference does certification make? Right. And I think the answer to that question is somewhat brand dependent, because some brands, Honda being a good example, has done a really fine job in convincing consumers that there's high value to their certified brand. I think there are other OEMs who have done not such a good job in convincing the public that there's high value in their certified brand. So, Honda, Toyota, BMW, I think are some of the ones that come to my mind where people who shop for these used cars definitely consider the certification to be of high value. But I think it would be remiss on my point if I did not give you a little bit of advice, at least from my perspective, how you should make the decision to certify or not to certify. And let me tell you something, I do believe in certification. The reason you can be sure I believe in certification is that when I helped my two older sons buy used cars, I made sure that they paid extra money to get the factory certification. So I really do believe in certifying used vehicles. But having said that, I don't appreciate it when people come to you and say, oh, you should certify all eligible used cars. And similarly, I don't really appreciate it when people come to you and say, oh, you should never certify a used car. It never makes sense. You know, the world is generally not that black or white that you can easily say always or never. So for me, if I were to make a decision whether I was going to certify a used vehicle or not, I want answers to two critical questions before I invest incremental additional dollars. Number one, that car in my market, certified versus uncertified, what is the difference in the average asking price? Because honestly, I see quite often in some markets where the incremental investment between the reconditioning and the purchase of the certification might add, let's say, $1,100 to the cost of the car, but the average asking price of the same car in the market, only difference being one certified, one not certified, is only a $600 difference. Really? Am I going to invest $1,100, you know, to cover a $600 bumped up asking price? That doesn't sound very good. And then the other question that I want an answer to before I invest my money is, what does it do to the market day supply? What is the market day supply of that Honda Accord certified in my market versus uncertified? Sometimes, and I'm not suggesting this is the norm, but sometimes I actually see the market day supply go up. So sometimes the cost, the additional incremental cost of the certification isn't matched by the additional increase in average asking price that you would expect, and sometimes the market day supply goes up. Really? Am I going to invest my money to make a car a higher market day supply and only go up $600 if it costs me $1,100 to certify it? Now, I'm not saying that that is the way it generally goes, but sometimes it does. You know, so before I spend that money to certify or not certify, I want to answer those two questions. What does it do? Does the average increase in average asking price cover the dollars that I'll additionally spend? And does the market day supply move in the right direction? Now, I'll tell you, if it's close to covering the extra investment and the market day supply is close, I would probably err on certifying the car, because there's a lot of intrinsic benefits in certifying cars. You guys know what they are. You know, you get more customers back to your service department, they tend to be happier, you're a hero at the factory. So if it's close, I'd probably err outside of certifying it. But those are the two questions I'd want to know before I certify any vehicle. Does that make sense? Okay, so back to my point. Market day supply is foundational to your success in a used vehicle operation. You have to know that. Now, once you know that, and hopefully now you do, or you did before you came in here, once you know that, you have a choice to make. That's right, you have a choice to make. You can either choose to manage something that you know matters to the outcome of your business, as I now hope you know that market day supply of your used vehicle inventory matters to the outcome of that department. You can either choose to manage that thing that you know matter or not, and it is your choice. But for whatever reason, if you choose not to manage something that you know that matters to the outcome of the department, then you should never be heard to wonder, you should never be heard to complain about less than optimal outcomes. Because it won't be because you didn't know something like market day supply mattered to the outcome. It might only be because you chose not to do anything about it. And I don't presume that's who you are, but that is nevertheless your reality. Okay? So if you do understand, and I hope you do, how important it is, and if you do say, yes, I am going to manage that thing that I know matters, like market day supply of my used vehicle inventory, then the question is, well, how would you do it? And the answer is, it's actually very simple. Here's what we need to do. We need to create a culture in our dealerships that requires conscious knowledge of a used vehicle's market day supply every time we make a decision that affects the used vehicle. I'm going to repeat that. We need to create a culture in our dealership that requires conscious knowledge, and even better yet, discussion among managers about a vehicle's market day supply any time we make a decision affecting a used vehicle. So let me give you a handful of examples of what those common decision moments are that you make every day that affect used vehicles. Example number one, do I want to own this used vehicle? Okay, fine. Among all the other factors I'm going to consider in determining whether I want to own that used vehicle, I have to know its market day supply. Example number two, if I do want to own this car, I got to put a value on it. Once again, among all the other factors I consider determining the value of a used vehicle, I must know its market day supply. Another example of a decision you make every day affecting a used vehicle, where you have to know its market day supply, is a used car traded into me. Am I going to keep this one or am I going to wholesale this one? Again, I have to know its market day supply. If I'm going to retail the car, I have to recondition the car. When I recondition a car, I often have to make decisions about what I'm going to repair and what I'm not going to fix. Once again, in making those critical decisions, among other things, I have to know its market day supply. Another decision, when the car comes out of recon, I put it on the lot and I have to put a price on it on day one. Guess what? I have to know its market day supply. And then I'll give you yet one more example. A deal comes to me at the desk and it's a short deal, or any deal for that matter, but particularly a short one. I have to make a decision whether I'm going to accept this low gross deal or let that shopper walk. Once again, I have to know the vehicle's market day supply. So why is it so critical that I know the vehicle's market day supply every time I make any decision affecting a used vehicle? Because guess what? When I do know it, I will start to make some different decisions. And as I make those different decisions, guess what happens to the overall market day supply of my inventory? It goes down. And as it goes down, just as you know it's true on the new car side, you are much more likely to be visited by success. And then I'll just ask you to do one other simple thing in addition to creating and maintaining this culture that I spoke about of knowing a vehicle, discussing a vehicle's market day supply every time you make any decision affecting the vehicle. I'd like to ask you to take that same conscious awareness of your inventory's market day supply into your used car management meetings. Because when you guys sit down to have those meetings, I know what you talk about. How many units, how many dollars, the average, the age. Okay, fine. All those things do matter. But somebody in that meeting better be saying, and oh, by the way, look at what the market day supply of this inventory is today. Look at what it was last week. Look at what it was last month. Because if it's not going in the right direction, you don't have the right to expect outcomes in the future consistent with those in the past. Does that make sense to you? Question.
Is there something that allows you to track your overall market day supply over a period of time?
Absolutely, and it depends. I'm assuming that most used vehicle inventory software today will show you the market day supply of a given vehicle, of your inventory as a whole today, and then trend graph it over time. Yeah, and let me make a point about used vehicle inventory software. Nobody should believe that because you use or subscribe to one software versus another, that in any way, shape, or form assures you of any sort of better outcome. Because I don't ever believe that's the case. I believe the only thing that ever creates sustainable performance improvement in a dealership is a proper strategy, well executed. So it's strategy, it's people, and it's process. Somewhere in that triumvirate might be some tools like software, inventory management software, but I assure you, inventory software management tools are not the key. The key to having sustainable performance improvement is a strategy properly executed. And that's why today what we're talking about is a strategy. It happens to be the velocity strategy, but does it have to be utilized with any particular software package? No. What's most important is the strategy being well executed. Okay? So, we understand the importance of market day supply. We understand our professional responsibility and obligation as owners, operators, managers to manage it. We have an understanding as to how to manage it. Now, I want to point out an issue, a challenge that you guys have before I move on to the next essential condition, because this is something you guys encounter every single day, and that is that you have to sell new cars. And you got to take trade-ins, and it's not exactly as if you can pick and choose the trade-ins you're going to take, right? So what are you to do after having just implored upon you, to do everything possible to drive down the market day supply of your used vehicle inventory? What are you to do when you're faced with that often, decision? Do I take this new car deal or not, knowing that it might, and very likely does, have a high market day supply trade-in associated with it, and often, unfortunately, you got to put big money in those high market day supply trade-ins. What are you to do? And you know what I say? I say take the new car deal. Take it, providing you're willing to accept two conditions. And if you're not willing to accept these two conditions, I don't think you should take the new car deal with that high market day supply trade-in. So what is the first of these two conditions? The first is, I'm going to ask you to know what you're about to do before you do it. Meaning that you know before you say yes to this new car deal, you know that if you do say yes, you're going to end up with this high supply, low demand, used trade-in, possibly for big money. Now, if you know that in advance, why in the world would you take the new car deal? Oh, wait a minute, there might be some good reasons. Maybe I need to sell that new car in order to hit a factory bonus plateau. That's a pretty good reason. Maybe I need to say yes to that new car deal to keep a high value, long customer doing business with me versus my competitor. That's a good reason. Maybe I need to say yes to that new car deal because it's one of the oldest units in stock and it needs to go away. That's a good reason. But I assure you that one day somebody's going to bring a new car deal to you and say, what do you think? And you're going to say, well, you know, it's a relatively fresh, good-looking, hot new car, and it's a pretty short deal, but wait a minute, tell me about the trade. Oh, you're telling me it's got high market day supply? Yeah? Okay, maybe that is a decision that you want to let your competitor, you know, have the privilege of taking that deal. So you see, as this first condition, I'm never going to ask you or tell you what decision to make, but what I am going to insist is that you make those decisions with all of the relevant facts. And certainly one of the most relevant facts in approving any new car deal is understanding what are the consequences of saying yes to that deal in terms of what you're going to get in a market day supply trade-in. It's one of the most relevant facts in making any new car decision. You'll know what the right decision is. I'm just simply going to insist that you make that decision mindful of all the relevant facts as the first condition. Now, you said yes. You rolled a new car. What did you just do? You just made a hard decision. You know, a hard decision by definition is a decision that you make that has negative consequences attached to it. And wouldn't it be nice in life and business if all of our decisions were easy? But that's not the reality. We have to always make decisions that are hard, meaning that they have negative consequences attached to it. So I ask you, what do mature, rational people do when they make hard decisions for the right reason, knowing that there are negative consequences attached? Do they, once they make those decisions, ignore those negative consequences? Do they hope and pray the heavens will open and divine intervention will make that negative consequence go away? No. What they do is they deal with it. That's what mature, rational people do when they make hard decisions for the right reasons that have difficult negative consequences attached. They address those consequences. They don't ignore them. They don't hope or pray they're going to go away. So what does addressing the consequence of making the decision to roll this new car look like now that we have this high market day supply trade-in? Well, I'll give you two examples of what it could look like. One example is, you know what I might do? I might wholesale out that trade-in right now. And you know, if I were to do that, what is likely to happen is that other people around me in the dealership are going to say, whoa, 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 hold on a minute. Did I just see that right? Did Dale just wholesale out a nice, fresh, good-looking retail piece? Yeah, that's what I did. Because you want to know why? Because I'm not just looking at these vehicles any longer with my car eyes. I'm also looking at these vehicles with my car brain, through this newfound lens called market day supply. And when I look at that trade-in through that lens of market day supply, what I can see that possibly other people around me might not see are some defects. Like its supply is everywhere and its demand is short, and maybe I own it for too much money. So you tell me what is the business justification for taking a trade-in that has high supply, low demand. I'm probably starting out in it pretty high, investing more money in it to try and sell it for what kind of profit? So yeah, that is exactly what I might have just done as one example of addressing a consequence of a decision that I made for a good reason. Another example of what it might look like is if I do decide to retail that car, I'm going to be very conscious, super conscious about how much money I spend to recondition it, because I see it now in a little different light. I see it with some defects, so I'm going to be super, super careful how much I spend. And then I might put it out on the lot day one and put a price on it to make zero, perhaps. And once again, lots of people in the dealership around me might say, oh, did he lose his mind? He just took a nice, fresh, good-looking retail piece, and on day one put a price on it to make zero? Yeah, that's exactly what I just did. Because once again, I ask you, what is the business justification for taking a car whose supply is everywhere in the market, its demand is nascent, and I already own it for a lot of money, to try and make what? I mean, I'd be lucky if I made anything. So yeah, my best, most sensible business judgment would say to get my money back out of it as quickly as I can and start over with a better opportunity. So those are two examples of what dealing with it might look like. But you see, where I know that you guys get yourselves in trouble, and I see it every single day, is that when you find yourself in possession of these high market day supply trade-ins, and either you don't recognize them for the defects that are inherent, or if you do recognize it, you still treat them like you treat every other car. And I'm telling you, those are the cars that more times than not end up costing you money. So market day supply, foundational, condition number one, must be present at all times. Proper market day supply in your inventory. It absolutely means nothing less than whether you have a hot franchise or a cold franchise on that used car lot, and you all certainly know how much more volume, gross profit, and enjoyment you derive when you have a hot franchise than a cold franchise. Any questions about that first condition, market day supply?
Hey, last question.
Please.
How do you deal with manufacturers like Infiniti that require you to buy so many cars from their auction that are overpriced?
Great question. Let's stop and think about that for a moment. First of all, I want to tell you, and I'm not sure Infiniti is the best example of this, but I will tell you that generally, the new car franchises that hold the highest goodwill blue sky value are ones that most carefully control the remarketing or redistribution of their used vehicles. You guys get that, right? Okay. So if you have a franchise that puts that pressure on you to buy a lot of these cars off lease, okay, it's kind of a first-class problem because it is ultimately likely supporting the value of your business, at least the new car side of your business. But it does ask you to make non-market-based and very often irrational decisions. It often, through the carrot and the stick that they give you to buy those cars, they induce you very often to buy cars that your market doesn't want, that your inventory doesn't need. Thank you very much, I already have 20 of them out there just like it. And if those weren't bad enough, it induces you to buy the cars for money that you wouldn't otherwise pay. These are non-market-based decisions. Now, I think that you have to recognize that if you're going to play ball with your manufacturer to do that, okay, and I do think there is some pretty good reason to do it, if you're going to do it, you're not magicians. Nobody should expect of you, or you should not expect of yourself, the same types of financial outcomes from selling cars that the market doesn't want, that your inventory doesn't need, that you paid more money than you know you should have. Should you really expect the same type of financial gross profit outcomes on those cars? Absolutely not. You're not magicians. So, when you have that situation, what I say, here's what I'd recommend. I would say you need to recognize that that is a separate set of inventory. If you happen to use my vAuto system, I'd give you another vAuto system. Call it Factory Hero inventory, okay? No charge. And what I would say to you is expect a different outcome. Because again, how could anyone hold you or hold yourself responsible for making the same type of profits, on cars that the market doesn't want, your inventory doesn't need, and you paid more money than you should have? You're doing that for a reason, but it should not come with expectations of the same outcomes. Now, there is one outcome you should not expect to be different. Exactly the turn. You should actually expect to turn those cars every bit as fast, and arguably even faster than your normal market-based decision inventory. Because typically those are high-dollar cars, and high-dollar cars are subject to a lot of market, depreciation, and particularly when the factory puts rebates on, on the new one. I mean, these are volatile, highly depreciating, risky cars. So if anything, you should be concerned about moving them faster. But from a gross profit outcome, you can't be expected to do as well. You shouldn't be. And maybe, and I just dealt with this deal, with this issue a couple days ago with the big BMW dealer in Irvine, California. I said to the guy, I said, look, I said, and it was very clear. I said, you have to lose money. You have, and here's your choice. I said, either you stop playing ball with the factory, which really wasn't an option for him, or number two option is that you play ball, you take these cars in, and you sell them fast and you lose money. Or the third option is you play ball at the factory, you take these cars in, and you price them to make profits, and they don't move because they're overpriced compared to what you own them for, and they get aged. Those are your three options. I said, which one do you want to choose? And he has been operating on the third option. And consequently, about 40% of his inventory growing is over 60 days of age. And I have to tell you something, that is kicking the can down the road because those cars are not appreciating. Quite the contrary, they're depreciating. They're high dollar cars depreciating. So the bill's going to come due eventually on those cars. So you tell me, I said, you want to play option number 1, option number 2, or option number 3. And in reality, the only right answer, if you're going to play ball with the factory at all, that's your call. Once you make that call, I say option number 2 is the only correct answer. And if you lose money on those cars, okay, that's your consequence of your decision to play ball at the factory, and quite possibly might just be a fair price to pay to support the value of that franchise. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yes. Question?
Yes.
What's considered an average market day supply, or does that depend on?
Good question. Good question. The average, okay, so, and there's no scientific or right answer in this. Here's my rule of thumb. If I find a used vehicle whose market day supply is 60 days or less, I consider it pretty fortunate from a market day supply standpoint. Now, it could be wrong in a lot of other respects, but market day supply cars 60 days or less, I consider to be particularly fortunate from a supply-demand standpoint. 61 to 90 in my mind is that mid-tier. 90 plus are cars that honestly, unless it was my strategy to specialize in those kind of cars, why would I want one? You know, would you ever call up your new car factory rep and say, send me some new car inventory, just make sure it has more than a 90-day supply, right? You'd never do that. So now having said that, let me just make this point, it might be a question. Would I expect a used car operator, inventory manager, used car manager to amass and maintain an entire inventory that averages 60 days or less? No. Those cars are out there, but they're not so common, not so plentiful that I could really hold a manager responsible for maintaining inventory 60 days or less. So if I see a used vehicle inventory that, you know, somewhere in the 70s, you know, mid-70s, upper 70s, I'm reasonably satisfied. But again, you know, one of the key performance indicators of your success is going to be the market day supply or inventory. So if I was operating a department today, you know, just as I want to know how many cars we sell, you know, what kind of gross we made every day, I want to know what's the average market day supply of my inventory, because I can control it. Was there a question? All good?
I would ask you to count the market day supply as a basis of inventory. So if you look in your market, I'm using the extreme of saying, well, look at this, there's 2 of this, and that's a 60-day supply. It's a waste of time, right?
Well, keep in mind the mathematical formula to derive market day supply. It's a fraction. The top number, the numerator, is the current available supply of that vehicle. The denominator, bottom number, is its average daily retail sales travel rate. Now, some of you know this, that your system will give you an NA. And when it gives you not available, it means that either there's not enough sample size in the supply or not enough transaction sample in the denominator to give you a statistically valid number. So what you guys sometimes do, and it's not inappropriate, is you expand the radius to bring in more data so that it can calculate a market day supply. But the point I'm trying to make here now is that if you ever get an NA, or if you ever find yourself expanding the distance in order to bring in enough data to get a calculated market day supply, that should be a red flag. Because what that's telling you is there's something about that car that's sort of not common. Either there's not enough supply of those vehicles in the market or not enough retail transactions. You got somewhat of an unusual car there. It's particularly in a highly dense populated market like this, you got a really unusual car. And what kind of buyers, or what kind of buyers do you need to find to buy an unusual car? Yeah, okay. So generally speaking, you know, that I would urge you to consider that a risk. Risky car. And I'm going to tell you one more thing, and then we're going to move on to the next essential condition. And this might sound a little bit counterintuitive to everything I've just been telling you, because I've been, you know, encouraging, imploring you to do everything possible to drive down the market day supply of your inventory. But in reality, there's actually no such thing as a bad car. Even if it's got a very high market day supply, there's no such thing as a bad car. All there ever really is bad money for a car, right? So in reality, I know a lot of guys who make tons of money specializing in nothing but high market day supply cars. But let's stop and think about this. Remember I told you we have to know a vehicle's market day supply before we make any decision affecting a used vehicle? So if I'm one of those guys who makes a lot of money specializing in high market day supply cars, I'll look at a car and I might see it has a high market day supply. Before I decide to own it, how do I already know I'm going to have to price it if I do own it in order to sell quickly? I'm going to have to price it aggressively.
Okay, and if I'm going to make any money pricing a car aggressively, how better have I purchased it? Purchase it right, okay? So if I see a high market day supply car, and if I can purchase it right, and I purchase it right, and I bring it back to my dealership, and I don't screw around with it, I price it to move it really aggressively, I'll sell that car, rinse, repeat, all over again, and I'll do that at high volume, and I'll make money. So you see, you know, there really is no such thing as a bad used car. There's only bad money for a used car. Now, given my choice, let me assure you, I'd rather have a lot full of cars with low market day supply than high market day supply. But if somebody said to me, Dale, I can't find those cars, I can't buy those cars, I would say, fine, I'll make plenty of money specializing in high market day supply cars, but I do it as a strategy. And again, the strategy is simply knowing what you're dealing with by knowing its market day supply. That single number, market day supply, tells you so much information about the likely outcome and how you need to interact with that car than any other single piece of information available to you. I can't stress that enough. It's one of the highest, it is the single highest value piece of information associated with any used car. It's foundational to its success. It's foundational to every decision you make affecting the used vehicle. Questions? Are we all good? Okay, when a blind guy asks you a question, you gotta give me a little bit. Sometimes I worry you guys all left. All right, so now we're gonna move to the second critical condition that must exist at all times in your used vehicle inventory to give you the opportunity, not to guarantee, just the opportunity to have the type of financial outcomes you're entitled to, and that is your responsibility at all times to make sure that every vehicle is rationally priced every day. Now notice I didn't say priced right, because honestly, I don't know the right price of any used car until it transacts. When it transacts, I'll tell you what the right price was. Up into that point, the best I could do is to tell you what is a rational price for a used car. But let's first agree on what is no longer, what rational price used vehicle inventory no longer means. It no longer means putting a price on a used vehicle in a manner consistent with the way that our industry has done it for the last 100 years. The way that our industry priced a used vehicle on day one for the past 100 years is that when it was fresh to us, we put a pretty big markup on it, maybe $4,000 for some initial period of time, like 30 days, and then if it was still out there 30 days later, we'd start dropping it. And I'm here to tell you that if your pricing strategy at all resembles what I just described, I guarantee it's costing you money. Guarantee it, it's costing you money. Now, it would be fair for you to say, hold on, Dale, how in the world can you tell me that a strategy of pricing a used vehicle on day one that has worked so well for so many for so long is now wrong? You know, pricing used cars the way I just described has made a lot of people really rich for a long time, like the last 100 years. It made a lot of people really wealthy. Now I come to you today and I say, forget it, it's wrong. Yeah. That's what I have to do, unfortunately. And why do I have to do that? Well, I need to digress for just a moment and take everyone back to early elementary school when we learned lessons of evolution. And in those early lessons of evolution, we learned that this planet was once inhabited by millions of species that are no longer here. They became extinct. And you know the two common threads that run through every extinct species, 100% without exception? The first is that their environment changed and they were unable to recognize a change in their environment, and or if they did recognize a change in their environment, they were unable or unwilling to adapt. Those are the conditions that have put every species extinct. Inability to recognize a change in their environment and or inability to adapt or unwillingness to adapt to that environment. Okay, fine. What does any of that have to do with us pricing used vehicles? Well, I'm here to tell you that the environment in which you do business today is radically different than every other market environment for the past 100 years. All of the owners, operators, managers of used car operations for the past 100 years operated in a radically different environment than we do today. You all are the first generation inheritors in the history of the industry of a radically transformed market. Yeah, for the first 100+ years of this used car business of ours, there were some changes, but they're relatively few and relatively slow. In the last decade or so, there has been a radical transformation. And I'm going to tell you something. If you cannot appreciate and understand and adapt your practices to this radically new market environment in which you do business, your fate is sealed. Absolutely sealed. You're pioneers. You are pioneers, truly pioneers, because you are learning how to do business in the first generation of a radically new market environment. So how is this market environment different such that we can no longer price used vehicles on day one the way we had successfully done it for the prior 100 years? Well, it has to do with the way that people shop for used cars. Now, in my day, before the internet, I know how it worked, and many of you, if you were around my age, you know how it worked too. Before the internet, the way that somebody found a used car they ended up buying is that when they were in the market for a used car, they drove down to Motor Mile, they pulled into our dealership, they got out of their car, and they walked our inventory. If they happened to land on a used car, life was great. If they didn't land on a used car, they got back in their automobile, they drove and walked somebody else's inventory. And that is the way that most people found the used car they ended up buying. And I'm sure there are still some of those people out there today, but I'm also sure that they're farther and fewer between every single day. The way that I believe most people do it today, and by the way, this would be a really fine time if you disagree to straighten me out, help me understand, but the way I believe most people find the used car today they end up buying is that before they leave home, they go to the internet, they go to a destination, sign up cars.com, an auto trader, one of those big sites where they presume a lot of vehicles to be. They enter their zip code, they enter the type of car they think they want, they hit search, and bam, they get tons of them. And they can't go out, won't go out and visit all those cars, so they reduce the long list to a short list. And please hear me carefully. I'm not saying that price is the only thing they use to narrow it down to a short list of vehicles that they'll actually go out and visit, but I'm pretty sure price is one of the things they use. And then they get it down to a short list of vehicles, 3, 4 cars, maybe they'll go out and visit this evening or this weekend. And you know what I think happens to all of us more and more every single day that goes by? I'm pretty sure I'm right about this, is that probably somebody today from your local market, your backyard, will likely drive right past your dealership to somebody else's dealership who has a vehicle comparable to yours. I believe that happens more and more to us every single day. And I'm not necessarily suggesting it's that car from that other dealership they end up buying, but all too often it is a car from one of those other dealerships that passed you up to go see that they do buy. I believe that is the way that people buy used cars today. Now, unless you want to tell me that isn't the way it works here, or I fundamentally have it wrong, then honestly, many of you have a lot of explaining to do to me. What in the world are you thinking? Many of you are still pricing cars as if nothing in the environment of way that people shop has changed. And I ask you, what's up with that? Do you really not perceive a change in this environment, the way that people shop? Or do you perceive it, but for some reason, you're not willing to give up on the old way of doing it? It's got to be one or the other, but either way, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. Because every single day, many of you are pricing vehicles in a manner that bears no rationality whatsoever to the way that people decide which stores they're going to visit or call. And I'm telling you, you've got to get with the program. You don't like it, I don't like it, I get it, but listen, this is our reality. This is our reality. This is the way that people shop in mass today, and probably more so every single day. So once you figure out that, okay, this environment has changed, even that old way worked so well for so long for so many, I'm prepared to give it up, then the question is, what is rational pricing? I mean, am I possibly here to deliver a message to you that you can't give a car the chance you need and deserve to make a good gross profit? Am I possibly telling you that if they can't be priced all high for some good gross opportunity on day one, do they all have to be priced in the basement on day one just to appeal to these, penny-pinching, non-loyal internet shoppers? Is that rational pricing? And the answer is absolutely not. Absolutely not. You see, the key to rational pricing a vehicle on day one is not to price them all high just because they happen to be priced to you, nor is it to price them all low in the basement. The key is to know which cars can and should on day one be priced for some good gross. And if you drop them very gradually versus which cars On day one, you should be prepared, if you need to price them aggressively and drop them really fast. That is the key to rational pricing on day one. So how is it that you're supposed to know which cars are which? Well, once again, it really is simple. You can make it more complicated. You can become more sophisticated. I don't necessarily know that you need to if you just follow a two-step process. And the first of these two steps, you guys don't need my help. First of these two steps, you guys are experts. You have the ability to walk around a used car, look at it on all four sides pretty quick and say, wow, that's a pretty special car. And you know them when you see them for a variety of reasons. You know them when you see them. And then you'll walk around the next car, you'll look at it the same way, and you'll say, it's just a car. And do not ever underestimate the value of your ability to do that, because thankfully, no matter what the internet is, there's always going to be an emotional component for a buyer of a used car. And your ability to look at that metal as merchandise and predict how likely it is to get a prospective shopper all excited is the first critical step in knowing whether that one on day one should be priced up here or down there. But unfortunately, that's where too many of us will stop. Today, what we need to do is take a second look at this vehicle. But you see, this time, not as merchandise to predict how likely it is to get somebody all excited, this time as an investment. And ask ourselves, as an investment, how likely is this vehicle to achieve our dealership's financial objectives? And what are our dealership's financial objectives when it comes to a used car? Simply two things: fast turn and high gross. At the end of the day, that's all we really care about, how much and how fast. Okay? So here's a question for you. In an efficient market, that was a hint. In an efficient market, what's the best way to predict how likely a used vehicle is to sell quickly and make gross easily? Market day supply, ding, ding, ding. There's your two-step process. I'm going to walk around this car, I'm going to look at it with my car eyes like a good car guy or car gal would, and I'm going to say, wow, that's a pretty unique, special car. And then I'm going to take a second look at this car, this time with my car brain, through this found lens called market day supply, and I'm going to see that that car's got a nice low market day supply. You want to know something? That is a car I can and should price on day one high for good gross, and if I drop it, I'm going to drop it very gradually. But on the other hand, I take a look at this next used vehicle as a car guy would, and I say, it's just a car, plain, nothing exciting about it. And then I take a second look, this time as an investment, and I see a high market day supply car. That is a car that I know I need on day one to price aggressively, and if I don't get action quickly, I got to drop it fast. Maybe it would help if I give you this analogy. Maybe it's like being a baseball player, getting up to the batter's plate. And by golly, no matter what that first pitch is, your instinct is to swing for the fence. Why not? You got two more pitches coming. And what I'm here to say to you today is we have to be better than that. We have to understand the realities of today's efficient used car market to know that what we have to do is we have to take two looks at every incoming opportunity for what they are, and they are in fact two things. First is merchandise, predict how likely it is to get somebody all excited, and then in the cold, hard light of day, we need to take a second unemotional look at this incoming opportunity, also for what it is, a financial investment, and ask ourselves, how likely is it to sell quickly, make gross easily, best measured by its market day supply, and be prepared to adjust our swing accordingly. And have the understanding of the realities of today's market to know that success in the used vehicle department is no longer defined by how many home runs we stock. It's defined by how many runs we score. And you see, the reason why pricing cars the old way is costing you money today is because you're holding out for a home run on every car for some period of time, regardless of its odds. And that is costing you dearly in terms of the precious opportunity you need to be scoring a lot of runs. So I'll say it, and I know you guys will feel better for having heard it from me. Here it comes. Get ready. Every car deserves a chance. There, you guys like that, don't you? I just ask you to acknowledge, in light of your new understanding of realities of today's market, to acknowledge and return to me that it no longer is rational to believe that every car deserves the same chance. Some cars deserve a longer, bigger chance than others, And what rational pricing on day one simply comes down to is your ability to discern one from the other. And if you just follow that two-step process, it's not difficult. So did I offend anybody with that?
No.
I mean, it's rational, and that's the best you can do. And that's actually what you must do. You must do in today's environment. You must price cars on day one rationally. But rational pricing does not mean everyone high, doesn't mean everyone low. It means knowing which ones are which. And again, it's pretty simple to do. Okay? We got the car priced rational. Now, how do I know when and how much to reprice it? When I should reprice it and how much I should reprice it? Well, I'm going to give you a strategy, and I'll tell you that I consider the strategy that I'm going to share with you to be a gift. And you know, there aren't many gifts that the internet has given us, the car dealer. Unfortunately, most of the gifts on the internet have gone to the car shopper or the car buyer. But there are a handful of gifts that we have gotten from the internet. And I'm going to tell you, every one is precious. And this one is truly, truly a special gift. So I'd like to introduce the strategy to you with an analogy. Because I believe that this analogy holds a lot of weight. I believe that there's a strong correlation between being a good inventory manager. And by the way, a good inventory manager today has a large number of responsibilities. But I don't consider any of those responsibilities more important to success than their skill in pricing a used vehicle. I believe that is the single most important, not the only, the single most important responsibility of any used vehicle inventory manager. But my point is, I believe there's a strong correlation between being a good inventory manager, pricing decision maker, and being a good parent. How does that analogy work? Well, a couple of things I believe we could all likely agree on about being a good parent. The first is that if we have more than one child, we understand the fact that each one is different. Each one has their own unique strengths and weaknesses. And consequently, it simply can't be right to say or to think that we're a good parent because we treat our kids all the same or give them all the same thing. Because in reality, they all need different things at a different time in a different manner. And I think we can all appreciate that. Another thing I believe we could all likely agree on about being a good parent is the importance of quality time. And quality time with our kids can take any form, but traditional forms of quality time are having meals together, putting them to bed at night, getting them out of bed in the morning. These tend to be those moments when we can maybe look into their eyes and possibly their souls and ask ourselves what's going on. But we also understand that the challenge with our kids is they don't often just have the ability to tell us exactly what's going on. Sometimes they don't even talk to us at all. And that makes it hard for us. We have to ask the right questions, read between the lines, connect the dots, and if you happen to get it right, hopefully have the means to give them what they need. Okay, fine. Maybe we all agree on that. How is that any related to making good inventory and pricing decisions? Well, the first step of this analogy, which I think is really important to understand, is that when you have a lot full of used cars, literally everyone is unique. Each one has its own unique strengths and weaknesses. And consequently, I don't believe it is as good as we need to be, or can be, to think that we're good inventory or pricing managers because we do things the same way to all cars and services. I mean, that just can't be as good as we need to be today because in reality, they all likely need something different to be done to them on any given day. Another thing I think that analogy holds weight on, and this is one that's always been very personal to me, is how well the decision maker knows their vehicles. Because, you know, I'm sure you've had this experience as I have. You know, you could ask a used car manager, you know, where's a certain car? Where's stock number, 1, 2, 3? And they might have to think about it, or they'll say, you know, it's out there second row, third from the end. Or it's out back waiting for a part, or somebody's driving it. And then you can ask that same question to another used car manager, and you know they're like deer in the headlight. They got no idea. And I'm telling you guys, you don't want anybody making any critical decision on any used car, certainly not the most critical decision, a pricing decision, unless they know their cars as you would hope they know their kids if they were to make critical life decisions like medical or education. I'm telling you, it's critically important that the decision maker of a price or anything you're going to do used vehicle really understands the car. And the used car manager has to have that capability. And here's a place where this parenting analogy goes differently in our favor on the used car lot. Unlike our kids that often can't tell us what's going on or don't tell us, whether you guys recognize it or not, every single day, every car is telling you exactly how they're doing out in that very competitive environment. You'd only wish, hope, and pray your kids could be as communicative and as transparent as your cars are every day in terms of how they're faring out in that very competitive environment. So how does that work? Because cars don't talk, but they really kind of do. Well, this brings me to the gift that I consider the internet being for you in this respect. And that is that, there are sites out there today like Cars.com and AutoTrader, and on any given day, there's a couple million used cars on those sites. And to me, what they look like are big voting machines in the sky. Because every day, all day long, people are clicking on those cars or not clicking on those cars like voting on them. And the gift that you have today is the ability to get the tabulated results of those votes on every car every day in the form of search result, SRP, and BDP clicks. And I'm going to tell you guys something. There's no information that I know of that comes to you from any department in your dealership that is more relevant, more actionable, more timely, more truthful than that data in terms of making a return on an investment. There's no information I know that you get that is more valuable, timely, relevant, actionable, truthful than that. Nobody's making this data up. Nobody's spinning it. No one's interpreting it. It's the purest expression of how your babies are doing out in that very competitive market. And I'm going to tell you, I don't care what else you want to consider in determining when and how much a used vehicle should be repriced. You should never ignore this information because, again, it's the purest expression imaginable of how your vehicles are doing. Now, is it necessarily a pricing issue if they're not performing well on SRP and BDP? Not necessarily. I want to give you two examples, but I want to be really clear about these two examples I'm going to give you. These are not hypothetical. I guarantee you these two examples are representative of 5 or 10 more cars, 5 or 10 or more vehicles in every single one of your inventories today. These two examples are representative of 5, 10 or more vehicles in your inventory today. The first vehicle I want to give you an example of is a car that you have that is relatively fresh. It's only been in inventory and online 10 days, but in those 10 days, it has garnered an unusually, an inordinately large number of appearances on a search result page. Maybe 1,000 times it's appeared on an SRP. But out of those 1,000 appearances, nobody's clicked on your car, 0 BDPs. That's your first car that you have 5, 10 times or more, every single one of you. Second car you have has a different profile, same time in inventory and online, 10 days or so, and it's only garnered 60 appearances on an SRP page. But out of those 60 appearances, it's got a very large number of clicks for a BDP, maybe 5. So you guys have that, your first car, 1,000 SRPs in 10 days, 0 BDPs. Second car, only 60 SRPs, but 5 BDPs. Can I tell you about your 2 kids? Let me tell you. That first car might be your daughter. She is in high school and she's little Miss Poppin. Every day when she gets to school, before the bell rings, a whole bunch of kids waiting by her locker to chat her up. At lunch, everybody wants to sit at her table. After school every day, she hangs out with her posse of friends every day. But you want to know something? As a parent, you notice something very unusual. And that is that the last 2 Fridays and Saturdays, she has sat home alone. She hasn't gone out, she hasn't hung out, she hasn't talked to anyone. Now, if that was your child exhibiting those behaviors, of course you would notice. Of course you'd get up and try and figure out what her deal is and help her through it. Well, I'm going to tell you something. That's the first example of the car I gave you. This is a car that is living in your inventory house, not once, not 5, 10 times or more in every one of your stores. This is a child in your inventory house that is in distress. She's screaming for your attention every day, hollering at you, telling you exactly what her problems are. And my question to you is, anybody home in your inventory house of yours? Or if there are people home, are they too busy doing other things to pay attention to these kids in distress? Because they could not be telling you in clear language every single day that they're in trouble. So what does this child need? What does this car need? Well, is the fact that it's so popular, so as to appear 1,000 times on searches in 10 days with no BDPs necessarily a price problem? No. It could be a merchandising problem. It could be photos, descriptions, or placement. But are those things easily addressed by you if you know you need to address them? Yeah. Okay? And if those things are properly addressed and she's still not getting BDP clicks, then it can only be price. And is that not also easily under your control? But the reality is, and I would bet everything on this, that every single one of you, I would bet, has one or more, and likely 10 or more, used vehicles in your inventory that have gone 30 days without a single BDP click. Do you realize that? That's like having a house full of kids that are screaming, telling you they're in distress, and I don't know if the fact is anyone's home or anyone's paying attention, but you're squandering a gift of the internet to know when and how much you need to reprice them. Now the second vehicle could be your son. He's sort of in that middle school, adolescent boy phase. He's got lots of issues, but this child is extremely shy. No, he's extremely inhibited. This poor boy can't talk to anybody, can't even look anybody in the eye. If that was once in a while, some kid at school is able to penetrate all that inhibition, and when they do, they find a really funny, warm-hearted, good kid, and then all they want to do is hang out with your kid. Now, if that was your child exhibiting those behaviors, of course you would notice. Of course you try and help them figure out what the issues are and work through them. Well, that's that second car in your inventory. That car that doesn't have hardly any SRPs. This car is so unpopular that it's telling you in the most gospel language the fact that it's only got 60 SRPs in 10 days, that there's not many people looking for this car. So what does this car need? Well, this car needs exposure. Do I need to tell you guys, the crack merchandisers I know you to be, how to give a vehicle more exposure if you know it needs more exposure? No, you guys know what to do. Put it on the front line. Put it on the point. Put it in the showroom. Put a spiff on a 10-day-old car that's lacking exposure. Let's make sure that everybody comes to the dealership today, sees this car, if you know it needs that help. And the SRP is telling you that every single day. Does this car need a price change? Yeah, maybe. Maybe it needs to have a price change up, because quite honestly, no car that only appears 60 times on an SRP should have been clicked on 5 times for BDP. Maybe the price is too right up front. But you see my point? Every single car, every single day, is giving you this gospel valuable language that gives you really good information about what you should be doing with these cars very often from a pricing standpoint. So if you want to consider how much action a car's gotten, how many calls, how many walk-ins, how many demo rides, fine. But all those very rational things are subject to a lot of vagaries of data and interpretation and people spinning it. You know, this is the purest form of expression. Nobody's making this data up. It's a gift. And if we don't use that, factor that in to knowing when and how much a car's price should be adjusted, once you have it priced rationally on day one, you're squandering a great gift. These are the two strategies that I know to be most rational. The first one, that two-step process on day one, and then no matter what else you want to do, paying attention to the SRP, the BDP performance of these vehicles every day thereafter. I know of no method of pricing vehicles that is more rational than these two strategies. Questions on that second condition? Your responsibility to price vehicles every day rationally. Did I offend anybody yet? Does it make sense?
Yes.
You guys have to understand your environment's changed, and you need to recognize and perceive that change, and you need to be prepared to adapt. And if you don't, it's not good.
I have a couple questions on price market. How do you feel about the dealers who have hidden fees?
Have what, I'm sorry?
Hidden fees. So the price on Auto Trader.
That sounds like a religious question to me.
Yeah, so the price on Auto Trader is $23,000, but then when you get to the dealership, there's a $2,000 hidden reconditioning fee that's suddenly averages.
So, you know, the unfortunate reality is that trickery works. To a certain extent it works, but it typically works for a short period of time, not a long period of time. And it is a form of trickery in my opinion. And ultimately, what it does is it frustrates your people, your employees, it frustrates your customers, and you know, eventually, you know, it taints your brand, who you are. But I understand, you know, for some period of time, you know, it might give you some short-term pleasure. But, you know, it's not the way and I know it's hard to do business in a market when other people are doing it, and I do know that it happens. And I do know it happens out here. But, you know, personally, if I were in a market where that was being done, I hope I don't offend anybody, but just telling you like I see it, I would do everything I can to report, you know, deceptive advertising practices to my association and my attorney general. Because you know what, I have a lot invested here, and I'm here for the long term. You know, and I have to be rational. I have to protect my investment. Okay. Third condition.
Dale, I have a
Yes.
question. How often do you change the price? Let's say I change the price today based on the VDPs and the SRP. When would be the next activities to change the price?
So basically, there are 4 steps that I would use. And I understand your question has to do with frequency, but I'm going to get to that. But first, let me tell you, there are 4 things that I would do in considering reviewing a price of a vehicle. Number 1, as I've already said, I would know the car. As a car guy, I would know the car. Because I do believe there still is art in the business. I'd know the car. Number 2, I'd know its market day supply. We talked about that. Number 3, I would know its SRP and BDP profile. The 4th step, in my opinion, is the one that really separates the pack of the winners and the losers in this business. This 4th step is one that I would do religiously, but for some reason, the industry as a whole just won't do it, and I think I understand why, because it takes time and effort, and you know, time and effort. But this 4th step is the one I really believe separates the pack, and that is that I would always click on the competitive set. I'd look at my vehicle in the context of those competing vehicles, and then I would take myself out of my shoes, being a car guy, and I'd put myself in the shoes of a shopper, and I would ask myself the question, if I was a shopper looking at this competitive set, deciding which 3 or 4 of these I'd go out and look at tonight, which ones would I choose? And in making that decision, I would look at the odometer of those competing vehicles to mine. I'd look at the colors, you know, some are better than others. I'd look at the type of seller. I would look at the geographic distance, and I would certainly look at the price. And then I would adjust my price given all those factors through the eyes of a shopper. I would adjust my price and surgically implant it in that list such that I would be one of the top 3 or 4 best values, likely to make somebody short list. That 4th step is time consuming. That 4th step isn't something that every car guy or gal can do, because taking yourself out of your own shoes, putting yourself in the shoes of a shopper, thinking like a shopper, is something that not everybody can do. But when that is done, in conjunction with those other 3 steps, now, in my opinion, you have affected the best practice of pricing a vehicle. Now, your question was, how often should I do it? Well, if you stop and think about it, that 4th step, as critical as it is, I mean, the car doesn't change from day to day. The market day supply changes slowly over time, typically. The VDP and SRP is sort of a trend. It doesn't radically change. But what does change every single day? The 4th step, the competitive set. And that's, in my opinion, the one that you really determines how frequently. Because if you price cars using those 4 steps properly, no question about it, 100% guarantee, you would see a lot more traffic if you're good at doing it. You would see a lot more traffic, and if you had good sales process, sell a lot more cars. But every day that goes by, you could even argue every hour of every day that goes by, but every day that goes by, if you don't review it, you're likely to be out of calibration. I mean, if I set my price on the 3rd best value in the market today, tomorrow I might be the 6th best. And every day that goes by, you get less calibrated to that competitive set. So you tell me, how often should you do that? Well, theoretically, the right answer is every day you should review that. Is that practical? Perhaps not. So okay, if it's not practical for me to do every day, could I do it every other day? Could I do it every 3rd day? I guarantee you, if I was operating a used car department today, it would not be more than every 3rd day. Because every day I'm probably getting out of calibration. And you let 3 days go by, and you know, you're gonna miss sales, you're gonna miss traffic, which translates into sales. So that would be my recommendation of best practice methodology, and at least every third day. And I try to do it every other or every day if I could. That's the frequency. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Yes. Okay. The third critical responsibility of ours is to create and maintain used vehicle inventory that possesses the maximum spread between what we own it for and what they're likely to be sold. Our responsibility to create and maintain used vehicle inventory that possesses the maximum spread between what we own it for and what they're likely to be sold. And I'm going to tell you guys something. I'm really passionate, really emotional about this, because the greatest threat that I perceive to our future in the retail automobile business is margin compression. I don't know if any of you noticed this. If you haven't, you should get your hands on the annual NADA Dealer Financial Health Report that they published about a month ago based on dealer performance in the country from 2017. I saw something in that report I never thought I would see in my career. I saw the average net profit per used vehicle sold gone negative. Negative $2. I never thought I would see the net profit per used vehicle in our industry go negative. It just went negative. We saw it go negative a long time ago on new cars. I never thought I would see that on used cars. So then I said, well, wait a minute, that couldn't have just happened. That had to be like a trend. So I went back and I pulled NADA's previous year-end financial health report, and sure enough, every year it had been trending down. This year it went negative. For the life of me, I don't know why that's not headline news in automotive news. I mean, holy cow. Where are we making money here if we're not making money on used cars? Are we truly just down to fixed? I'm telling you guys, this is a problem. Let me ask you this. Have you gotten to the end of the month and gotten the financial statement handed to you, and you look at it, and you look at it again and again, and you say, wait a minute, this can't be right. There's got to be some mistake. It just isn't possible that we did all that business, and this is what we have to show for it. You guys have that experience lately? Yeah, no. Liar. I'm telling you, this is something that is happening and will happen ever more often as you go forward. You know, that's the reality. That's the biggest risk I see to our future is margin compression. And guess what? You can't stop it. You cannot stop it. It's a feature of the internet. It's a feature of a transparent, efficient market, and one that gets more so every day. But what you can do and what you must do is mitigate it. Mitigate it. And once again, I'm sorry to do this, I have to remind you of your professional responsibility. Because once you know that something that affects your bottom line is affecting your bottom line, you have a choice. You can either choose to manage it or not manage it. And margin compression is real, and it's not ever going to stop. It's going to get more real every day. Now, you guys have to make decisions as owners, operators, managers, whether you are going to take responsibility for mitigating the effect of the margin compression on your dealership. And there are, in fact, some things that you can't do. But unfortunately, these are new additional things. And you want to know something? In reality, none of us really want more additional things to do. We all already have enough things to do. But I'm sorry, unless you want to say this isn't real, or unless you want to ignore it, and I believe not address your professional responsibility, you've got to do these things. You've chosen this profession. This is your reality. So these new additional disciplines of management, I'm going to quickly touch on. The first is how right you buy your cars, used cars. How efficiently you acquire your used cars. Now, I want to speak to you guys about this, that every single one of you, and every one of your dealerships has multiple buyers. And when I say buyers, you probably naturally think of people who go to auctions. They are buyers. But for the purpose of this discussion, I'd like to expand the definition of buyers to include the people, yes, who go to auction, but anybody in the dealership who has the authority to appraise a car. They are a buyer. So with that expanded definition, you would all agree with me that all of you have many buyers underneath each rooftop that you operate, right? Well, let me tell you a reality about that. There is a wide variance among all those buyer appraisers that work for you, a wide variance in terms of how right they have the ability to acquire a used car, a wide variance. And you want to know something? You cannot afford it. It's always been there. This is not anything new. What is new is that you are the first generation of operators, those pioneers I spoke about, first generation to operate in a highly margin compressed environment. You see, let me tell you something, back in my day, this happened, we had it, nothing new. Let me just explain this to you. I had a manager by the name of Elmer. Elmer was a phenomenal guy in a lot of respects. He was really good with salespeople, really good with customers. The lot was pristine. Elmer had one problem. Whenever he appraised a car, he hit him heavy. Hit him heavy. We used to have to fight to keep salespeople away from going to Elmer. But, you know, occasionally they got to him, and he appraised a car, and he hit him heavy. But for me, back in those pre-internet days, when Elmer did that, it was not that big of a problem for two reasons. Number one, back in those days, we used to average front end 2,700, 2,750, 2,800 front end gross profits. So, okay, on Elmer's cars, I made 22, 2,300. I still made plenty. You don't have that luxury. Today, if you buy a car right, price it right, and sell it fast, I say you barely have enough front end profit to justify the activity. You don't have that luxury that I had. And I had yet another luxury. When Elmer really stepped deep into a car, you know, I could just put it out on a lot and ask a little more money for it, and I typically got it. Okay, you don't have that luxury either, but yet every single one of you has Elmer or Elmers working for you, and you know it's true. So if you care about this thing that I sort of think you do care about, called average front end gross profit, I sort of think that's something you guys are aware of, right? Which ultimately flows into your total gross, which ultimately flows into your net, which I know you care about. Let me tell you something. The battleground for front end gross profit, guys and gals, begins with how right we buy it. And every single one of you has people in your dealership or out on the street that are not buying them as efficiently as other people who do the same job for you. And either it's due to a lack of training, you know, skill, maybe bad eyesight, maybe they're too busy, they're harried, they're in a rush. Whatever reason, it's happening to you. And you know it's true, you know it's real. So my question to you is, are you prepared to do something about it? And I'd say you have to. This is your reality. This is a highly margin compressed thing. And I also want to tell you this. What would naturally be the first reaction of a car person when their front end gross profits are under pressure? Their first reaction would be to do what? Raise price. Well, let me tell you something. That used to be completely right in every previous environment before us. You know, when customers didn't know better, raise your price, you'd improve your gross. Today, it is exactly the wrong thing to do. When you guys raise your price, okay, all you're doing is like driving a car and you put on the brake. You're discouraging traffic, you're going to slow your inventory, you're going to slow sales, the cars are going to age, and they're eventually going to gross even worse. So you got to take that old strategy off the table. The first battleground for front-end gross profit and ultimately, net profit is to measure and manage how right you buy them. And all of you have people working for you today that habitually, consistently, due to any of those number of reasons, pay more money than they need to acquire them, and you can't afford it. So what do we need to do? We need to manage them. But before we can manage anything, we have to measure. And if we ever bothered to measure how right somebody puts us in our used cars, you know how we do it, right? We take what they paid for it versus its wholesale value. So if they paid 10 and its wholesale value is 9, we could easily say they paid a Gino too much for the car. I don't like that form of measurement because it requires you and me to agree the wholesale value of the car is 9. And don't we all know how difficult it is to get two good used car people to agree on the wholesale value of a car? So for that reason, what I'm giving you in velocity management is a better form of measurement. We call it the cost to market form of measurement. How is cost to market different than that old way of doing it? Well, instead of taking what we paid for the car against its wholesale value, we're going to take what we paid for the vehicle as a percentage of its average retail asking price. So in other words, if we paid $8,500 for a car and the average retail price of that car cost you is $10,000, we divide the $8,500 into the $10,000, we'd say we paid 85% cost to market. That is a better form of measurement because it's objective. We don't have to debate it. We don't have to disagree. It is what it is. Every single one of you today, you know what you paid for the car, and every single one of you today has a tool that shows you what the average retail asking price is. Okay, fine, what are we gonna do with that measurement, that cost of market measurement? Well, I'm gonna warn you, the first time you do what I'm gonna suggest you do, prepare yourself for some form of a cardiac event. I'm gonna request of you, as an ongoing discipline of management, not a one-time, not an occasional, ongoing discipline of management, is that you keep track of every buyer appraiser's last 60 days average acquisition cost of market. Now, acquisition cost of market being a little bit different than the total cost of market. Total cost of market includes what you paid for it, plus what you spent to recondition it, plus what you spent or what you packed it. Acquisition cost of market is strictly what JCB the car for. And if you bought it at auction, I would say it's okay to add in auction fees and transportation, but nothing else. So when you line up everybody's average acquisition over the last 60 purchases, you're gonna see for the first time your Elmers. And I'm gonna tell you again, you can't afford that. Because if you think you can afford that, that's your choice. But then don't wonder, don't complain about less than optimal average front-end gross profits and ultimately net profits, because it won't be because you didn't know this was happening. It's happening to 100% of you. The only question is, will you do anything about it? And I hope and believe you would. The second thing that we need to do as an industry, the good battle to fight, this margin compression and protect our front-end margins and ultimately our net profit, is we need to be more efficient about how much money we spend to recondition our used cars. Now, I know when I say that, many of you think I'm going to talk about how you should mark them up between mechanical and sales, and in fact, that's not what we're talking about. Do I have an opinion on that? Yeah, you bet I do, but that's religious ground, okay? What I'm going to talk to you about today, right now, is how much money you pay outside companies and people for parts, services, and labor associated with reconditioning. Nothing to do with your internal markup policy. I'm going to repeat it. What you pay outside companies and people for parts, services, and labor associated with reconditioning. And you know what I'm here to tell you? 100% of you pay more money than you need to. And let me just prove that to you, or attempt to prove that to you. Let me model a little discussion. And think about whether a discussion like this has ever occurred in your dealership. I'm the GM. I call in my fixed ops guy, Charlie. I say, Charlie, here's the deal. I want you to go away, come back tomorrow, and have me analyze the last 200 used car internal reconditioning ROs. And I want you to itemize for me the top 20 parts, things that we install when we recondition a used car, and the average price we pay for those top 20 things. Things like tires and rotors and pads and belts and plates, fluids, okay? The top 20 things we do, average price we pay. Then I want you to itemize for me the top 5 sublet services we contract for, and the average price we pay for those jobs, paint, glass, tint, rubber, upholstery. And then I want you to calculate for me the average internal used car effective labor, or the average effective labor rate we pay somebody in our shop to recondition these cars. So Charlie goes away, comes back to the next day with this information. I look at it and I say, okay, Charlie, here's the deal. Your bonus next month is based on, I want to see a 20% reduction in the average price we pay for comparable quality parts to those outside companies. I want to see a 15% reduction in what we pay those sublet service providers, and I want to see a 2.5% reduction in the average internal effective labor. Has a conversation like that occurred in your dealership? No. So what in the world are we thinking? Do we not recognize the change in our environment that I'm talking about called margin compression? Or are we just not willing to do anything about it? What other industry in the entire world would sit there and absorb the type of margin compression that you're being subjected to without going back to their vendors and maniacally going and consistently going back to our vendors and demanding more value? All of us vendors. I'm talking particularly now in the used car department. This applies to all of us vendors that you engage in every department. And better value might come in the form of lower prices. It might come in the form of more value-added services or a combination of both. But you guys cannot sit there and absorb, this margin compression without going back to your vendors who supply you parts and labor associated with reconditioning. You've got a big opportunity here. And just in the event you don't believe this is actually the case, let me try one more thing at you. What do you think a good shop manager does for a good technician who gets in trouble on a job today? How do they typically make that up to them? They give them gravy work, right? What's the best gravy work in the shop? Is it not used car reconditioning and PDIs? Okay, ready for this? I hope I'm wrong. I don't think I am. I don't think any one of you, I don't think there's a single one of you in this room today that would know if 100% of your used car reconditioning was being performed by the highest cost labor in your shop. Think about that. And I'm not saying that the shop manager should take care of their guys in that way, but the fact that not one of us would know if 100% of the cars are being reconditioned by the highest labor is further evidence that we're not paying attention to things we need to pay attention to. I'm going to tell you guys something. Making money in the used car department, and I believe making money in the dealership today, is a game of inches. It's a game of inches. You got to do a lot of little things consistently right that all add up to maybe a little bit of improvement. So, this is no longer a game where we can just believe we can sell enough cars, there's enough margin, that when it's all said and done at the end of the month, we're going to be good. Those days are largely behind us. If they're not behind you today, they will be soon. We have to be engineers of profit, and we have to look and be disciplined to find it in a lot of little areas and collect a little bit of it here, a little bit of it there. And then the third area that you need to address to maximize the spread between what you own them for, what they're likely to be sold for, is just as you have people who pay more money than they should acquiring them, you have people who give away more discount than they need to when they sell them. And you can't afford that. Once you come to the rational, enlightened understanding that used cars have to be priced right in order to attract enough shoppers and sell enough cars to make this investment pay off, once you get to that enlightened destination of understanding, you cannot avoid the conclusion that you can't discount or can't discount as much. So what we have to do is we have to change the culture in our showroom that defines success. It no longer can just be volume. It yes has to be volume, but we also have to measure, manage, and reward people based on how much discount they did not give. And until we get to a point where we've created a culture in our showrooms such that you look into the faces of our salespeople and our sales managers, and you don't just see people, you see a number. Everybody who puts their name on a deal, salesperson or sales manager alike, needs to be accountable for the amount of discount on that deal. And everybody needs to own an average over the last 30, 60 days. What is your average discount? What is your average discount? What is your average discount? And that recognition needs to be followed by reward in our dealerships such that we change the culture of what defines a successful salesperson. So these are three rational, legitimate battlegrounds to protect our front-end gross profit, to fulfill our professional responsibility of this third condition to create and maintain used vehicle inventory that possesses the maximum spread between what we own them for and what they're likely to be sold for. They require new additional disciplines of management. And again, I have to remind you, that brings you to that choice. As professional operators, managers, and owners, will you recognize this reality of margin compression, and will you adapt your practices to address the mitigation of the margin compression? Question? Yes.
Do you think, new car store, there should be a difference between internal labor rates and retail rates?
You really want to drag me into that conversation?
When you're talking about that,
Well,
this is my
okay.
store, I'm retail.
All right, you asked for it, I'm going to give it to you, okay? Open a dictionary, look at the definition of a tax. A tax is any time you add an amount to an item that is not offset by equal or greater value, it's a tax. Anytime you add an amount to a vehicle that is not offset by equal or greater value, it is a tax. Now, is there one of you in this room that would not agree that the more you tax an item, the more you slow its transactability? All right, it tends to be why you guys are conservatives. Okay. You know this, but in reality, you are some of the biggest taxers in the world, and you don't seem to recognize that it does the evil in your store, is what you believe it does in the general economy, and I don't quite understand that. So, let me tell you something. If you recondition a car and charge it, pick a number, $1,100. If the fair market value of that work in your market is $800, and that includes a profit, by the way, if the fair market work of comparable quality work that you put in is $800, the difference between $800 and $1,100 is $300. That's a tax. You've taxed that car. When you guys, as owners, the car gets into the sales department, and you put an $800 pack on the car. let's say maybe that $800 pack comes with a 90-day limited warranty and a 7-day exchange policy. If the fair value of that limited warranty and exchange policy is $400, the difference between the $400 real value you added and the $800 that you packed it, the additional $400, it's a tax. Now, this did not used to be a problem, because in the old used car environment, not yours, the previous 100 years of used car inefficient market environment, service department could tax the car to the sales department, owner could tax the car in the sales department, and we were pretty good at passing the car with those taxes built into the price to the shoppers. They took them. They didn't know better. Today, they don't take them like they used to. So what happens is it starts to back up, kind of like a toilet. It starts to back up. You sell fewer cars, you put fewer cars through the shop, okay? So you make the decision. You make the decision.
Well done.
Okay, the fourth and final condition. I'm going to surprise you with this. In fact, I might even shock you. The fourth and final condition, our responsibility. If I was having this meeting with you 2 years ago, I would have said it's your responsibility to manage the age of your used vehicle inventory. You ready for this? Ready? And I could not be more serious. I do not believe in managing the age of used vehicles. Can you repeat that? Yeah. Can you repeat that? I do not believe in managing the age of used vehicle inventory.
I get it.
Now, I want to be also very clear about this. Not for a second am I encouraging anybody in this room today to stop managing your inventory age, because you're not going to be ready to do that today. But I'm going to see if I can get you started to think and perhaps act in a better manner than managing inventory age. But I'm serious. If I was operating a used vehicle department today, age would be irrelevant. So before we get into that, first, I want to point out that I think possibly you all have a problem that you might not have thought about when you came in here today. I just got done hopefully impressing upon you, if you didn't already know, that your margins this year are going to be less than your margins were last year. That market gets more efficient every year. The wholesale and retail market gets more efficient. In fact, I just want to tell you, if you have any doubt about that, go back to NADA. They have a study that they performed since 2009. And since 2009, they documented that every year that's gone by, you guys have had to invest more dollars in a used car. You know, it was 14, 14.5, 16, you know, it's gone up. Every year it's gone up. And every year that you've invested more money in a used car, your front-end gross profit's gone down. That's a classic ROI investment. Since 2000, they started tracking in 2009. I don't know what happened before then, but since 2009, every year you've had to invest more money in a used car to yield an ever smaller front-end gross profit. That's a classic ROI investment. That's how you make your money. How much do I have to invest in order to yield what return? Every year it's gone down. So unless you want to believe that's going to stop, the reality is that this year you're going to have a lower return on investment than you did last year. It's been that way since they started measuring in 2009. Okay? And your cost of doing business this year is going to be higher than it was last year. No one would debate that. And yet, in light of smaller return on investment returns, smaller margins, higher cost of doing business, I think most of you came in the room here today with the sincere belief that if you work hard and do some things right this year, you should be able to make more money in used cars than you did last year. I don't think anybody came in here today thinking, oh my gosh, you know, unless, you know, lightning struck, you know, with our lower margins and higher cost of doing business, nobody should expect to make more money than we did last year. Quite the contrary, you all expect to make more. And I don't really understand how you're so sure of that. Unless you don't believe this margin compression is real, unless you don't believe your cost of doing business this year are going to be higher, how in the world can you believe that it's rational to expect to make more money this year than last year? Or maybe put another way, what would be the only strategy you could possibly offer to suggest that it would be possible to make more money this year than last year in light of smaller margins and higher costs? What would you have to do? Sell more cars. And you're right. You're right. You are going to have to sell more cars. But you want to know something? If selling more cars is the only answer we have, then it's just a matter of time before we're all finished. You want to know why? Because there's some natural limit to volume. There's some natural limit to how many cars this market will buy this year. And there's some natural limit to how many cars your competition is going to allow you to sell. And maybe we're already at that point. So if selling more cars is the only answer, you're in trouble. Because margin compression isn't going to stop. Cost of doing business is going to keep going up. It will get to a point where you got to do 500, 1,000, 1,500 retail eventually just to stay ahead of the monster. And you know that's not going to happen. So the good news is there is something else. There is something else we can do. But it's going to be hard today for us to get our heads around it. I'm going to see if I can get you started. So let me tell you how I think you'd all think about the following situation. If you had a used vehicle in stock that sold after 75 days and made a $300 front-end gross profit, let me tell you how I'm pretty sure all of you would think about it. You would say, well, it's not what I needed to make. It's not what I wanted to make, but it's certainly better than a loss. That's how I believe you'd all think about it. I wouldn't, but you would. So let's think about it slightly different. Let's say instead of starting with used cars and working for profit, let's say that we're starting with oranges and we're working for orange juice. Now you understand that the oranges we're starting with this year are slightly drier than they were last year, and yet you intend to make more orange juice this year. So what are you going to have to do? Well, you've already told me you're going to have to do more volume. You're going to have to squeeze more oranges, and I believe that's correct. But there's a limit to how many oranges anyone can squeeze in a day, a week, a month, a year. But to be sure, you guys are going to be orange squeezing machines. Now, suppose I hand you one of those slightly drier oranges, and I say, here, take it and work it. So you take that slightly drier orange, and you work it and labor with it, really work it, and after a long, hard effort, it produces a small drop of juice. All of you can easily understand that if you consume that little drop of juice after that long, hard effort, it did not return to your system what it took to create. None of you have any problem understanding that concept. And if you allow me to translate that concept into financial terms, I would say that that small drop of juice did not return a meaningful marginal contribution to the system. Meaning simply it took more to create than a return. You guys can all understand that easily. But for some reason, when it came to that used car that sold after 75 days and made a $300 gross profit, you can't see it the same way. That's a problem. Maybe it's an opportunity. So let's think about this. Dealership A and dealership B. And they both have exactly the same used car. And after 45 short days, dealership A says, I'm out, I'm done. He retails his and he loses $300 front gross after 45 days. Dealership B looks at him and says, you know, you're crazy, you're nuts, you shouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. He doesn't do it. He hangs on to his, and at 75 days, he sells his, and he makes 300 front. So A lost 345, B made 300 front at 75. You got that? Would anybody in this room like to argue that B made a smarter financial decision? Really? Nobody. So you're arguing that A made the smarter financial decision. My question was, would anybody argue that B made the smarter financial decision? No?
At least he made a profit.
No? Well, maybe one. You think he made the smarter financial decision?
Well, yeah,
If nobody would really want to argue that B made the smarter financial decision, you're saying A made the smarter financial decision, I got a question for you. Why won't any of you act like A? Why won't you act like A if you know A made the smarter financial decision? You see, I believe that answering that question holds the key to our future. We'll come back to that. I told you I don't believe in managing inventory age, and I don't. Let's stop and think about it. Why do we all know even if we don't always act in accordance with our knowledge? Why do we all know that after a certain period of time, a used vehicle in stock should go away, needs to go away? Why do we know that's right? Well, let me give you the answer in the interest of time. But if I tell you one thing you don't agree with, call me out. Don't let me scam you. The reason we all know that a used car after a certain period of time needs to go away is that what we paid for didn't change, but the market value changed, right? Fair?
Yep. Yep.
Would you allow me to translate that into financial terms? And say the reason we know after a certain period of time that a used car needs to go away is that it no longer has the likelihood of making a meaningful marginal contribution? Am I good? Okay, let me ask you this question. What if I told you that you have an unbelievable yet another gift of the internet, and you do? What if I told you that you today have the ability to know as early as day one that a vehicle does not likely possess the ability to make a meaningful marginal contribution? If you knew that as early as day one, would you be wealthier and wiser for dealing with it on day one or 59 days later? That's right. And again, in the interest of time, let me tell you why that's the right answer. But don't let me tell you something you don't believe 100% to be true. The first reason why we'd be wealthier and wiser if we're dealing with it on day one is because even though it's not true all the time, more times than not, our first out is our best out. Fair? The second reason we know we'd be wealthier and wiser for dealing with it is what could we do that we otherwise couldn't do? Let's say we had $15,000 invested in the vehicle and it had this unfortunate condition. We got out of it on day one, we lost $300. We could take $14,700 back and do what with it for the next 59 days that we otherwise couldn't do? Reinvest it. So for those two reasons, we would all agree, right? We'd be wealthier and wiser for dealing with it on day one. Well, what if you knew the car had that problem on day one, and in spite of knowing it, you said, we're going to let it ride? If I asked you, what is your thinking? If you were honest with me, what would the only answer you would have to give me if you're honest with me? I'm hoping to get lucky. Now let me ask you this question. In every other era, in every other generation of used car history, how often did we get lucky on a used car lot? All the time, right? How often do we get lucky in this market environment? It's rare. I'm going to tell you guys something. Please hear this carefully. The strategy of hoping and praying to get lucky on a used car lot is no longer a legitimate strategy for running a used car business. It is no longer a legitimate strategy. It once was a completely legitimate. I have to remind you, you are pioneers. You are the first generation inheritors of a radically different used car environment. You're the first generation where hoping and praying to get lucky on a used car lot is no longer a legitimate strategy for running a used car business. But that would be the only strategy you could possibly give me, if you're honest, if you knew the car had that problem and you said, we're going to let it ride. So let's stop and think about this. The age of a vehicle was never the problem. The calendar was simply a technology. It was simply the best available technology to us for the first 100 years of our business to inform us of a problem. The problem being that a car did not likely have the ability to make a meaningful marginal contribution. The calendar was simply the best available technology to inform us of the problem. Today, the calendar looks like the sundial to me. You have an unbelievable gift of the transparency of the market and the available technology to know as early as day one that a car likely does not have the ability to make a meaningful marginal contribution. But you won't act on it. Even though you agreed with me a moment ago that you'd be wealthier and wiser for for dealing with it, you won't deal with it. Even if you know it, you won't deal with it. So let me explain what I think is going on there. You see, this business of ours has been around for 100 plus years, this used car business. And what has happened for the first 100 or plus years could be summed up in a Hebraic expression, the door by door. Anyone know what that means? Thank you, I heard it. Say it out loud.
Something like from generation to generation.
From generation to generation. From generation to generation of used car owner, operator, manager for the past 100 years, all the generations of people who did our jobs before us, they perfected practices of quote-unquote good used car management. And they handed down from generation to generation and those practices of quote-unquote used car management. They tweaked them, they refined them, they optimized them to take maximum advantage for us of that inefficient market. And then you know what happened to us? Let me tell you what happened to us. Those so-called good practices of used car management were handed down to us from the people who taught us the business as if they were inscribed on tablets from the mountain on high. And you know what we've done with those quote-unquote good practices of used car management on those tablets? We've clung to them. Unquestionably, we've clung to them. And you know what I've discovered? I've discovered that many of them, although they were completely legit for every other generation, no longer are good for us. And I could give you an hour's worth of examples, but in the interest of time, let me just give you two. Traditional, quote-unquote, good used car management practices consider losses on used cars to be bad, and they should be avoided as long as possible. And I'm sure that's true in the old environment. Avoid the loss, eventually we'd get lucky. But you know what I have come to understand? I've come to understand that some losses on some used cars ought not to be avoided. They ought to be sought out, and realized as soon as possible. But you want to know something? Nobody in any dealership today would pat me on the back and give me an attaboy for finding some losses on fresh used cars and taking them now. Nobody would ever recognize that as the right thing to do. Quite the contrary, right? Let me give you one more example, and again, I could give you hours worth of examples. Another example of quote-unquote good used car management practice. I don't like small grosses any more than anybody else likes small grosses, and I don't particularly like small grosses on fresh cars. But you know what I've come to realize? I've come to realize that some small grosses on fresh cars are nothing less than freaking victories. We should be high-fiving each other, possibly paying bonuses for small gross profits on some used cars, but nobody in any dealership today would ever recognize that. Quite the contrary. They'd say, oh my God, you took a small gross on a fresh car. You begin to see what I mean? These so-called good practices and principles of used car management that I'm sure were 1,000% right until they got to us, we operate with those principles and practices as if nothing in our environment is different. And in reality, everything in our environment is different. But we want to still cling unquestionably to these so-called old principles and practices of used cars. And that brings me back to the question. Why do you all know that A made the smarter financial decision? Even though I could tell you couldn't even get the words out of your mouth, but you knew it. Why do you all know that A made the smarter financial decision, but yet you won't act like A? Well, let me tell you, maybe to a certain extent I might have tricked you. Because the way I asked you the question, you know what I got you guys to do? I asked you who made the smarter financial decision. What I got you to do is I got you to take off your car hat, and I got you to put on your financial hat. And with your financial hat on, you knew what the right answer was. But put your car hat on, and you can't give me the right answer. because you still operate clinging to those unquestioned old practices and principles of good used car management. And therein lies the problem, therein lies the opportunity. So I told you that I no longer believe in managing inventory age, and I don't. Don't stop, you're not going to be ready, but I would not if I were operating a used car lot today. You see, I told you that if volume was our only answer, it's only a matter of time before we're finished. I told you there's something else. And the something else is this. We are all going to have to come to understand that there is sufficiently little margin in these cars that allows us to believe that we can do the volume that we're capable of doing. And when all the dust settles, there's going to be enough profit to make it worthwhile. We are simply running out of time to believe that we can just make money by selling cars. Which sort of leads me to a conclusion. That you see, we think our jobs are to sell cars. Our job is not to sell cars. Our job, number one, is to make money. That's our job. The way we have made money in the past is by selling cars. And it worked. There was enough available volume and there was enough available margin where selling cars equated to making money. But I want you guys to realize that in today's environment, and if it isn't true for you today, it will certainly be true for you in the near future, that you can no longer believe that just selling cars will make money. It's running out. The clock is in the 11th hour on that. You are going to have to come to understand that you are making money. You're going to work to make money, not to sell cars. Selling cars is a way that you make money, but it's not your job. Your job is to make money. You're going to have to learn how to make money by both selling cars and by managing money. Here's the problem. When I ask you to act like a good money manager, it's going to cause you to violate those so-called good practices and principles of used car management. That's what it does. If I ask you to make decisions in that used car operation, not just like a good car guy or gal should or would, but also like a good money manager would, it's going to create conflict. It's going to cause you to violate those practices and principles. And that's why it's going to be hard for you today to get your heads around it. But I'm going to give you a challenge to try and get you to start thinking and possibly acting in a more financially prudent manner in managing inventory than with the old technology of the counter. And I'm going to stake my personal and professional reputation on the outcome if you're willing to try what I'm going to challenge you to do. I'm going to challenge you to begin to manage your inventory as if, and it is, a portfolio investment fund. Imagine that. And what I'm going to ask you to do is every Monday, compile a list of 5 vehicles that represent the 5 worst investments in your inventory. And the way you're going to define those 5 worst investments is to identify cars that bear 2 unfortunate qualities. They have the highest cost to market, and they have the highest market day supply. When a particular car has one of the highest market day supplies, or one of the highest cost to markets in your inventory, that's one of your 5 cars, and you find the 5 cars that have those worst characteristics. That's the first step. The second step is that before we close up shop this week, those cars are gone. Hook or crook, wholesale or retail, they're converted to cash. They're gone. Now notice age had nothing to do with it. I don't care what the age is. What I care about is that they possess those 2 core qualities of high cost to market and high market day supply. They're gone. They're gone. Before we go home at the end of this week, they're converted to cash. Now, if you are willing to do that for 60 days, 2 months, I'll stake my personal, professional reputation that two things will occur. The first thing is that after about 60 days of doing this, you won't have many, if any, age cars. These are your age cars. You just have the unbelievable gift and benefit of now being able to recognize them early. These are your age cars. In the early weeks that you do this, most of these cars that hit that list will be age cars. But once you work through some of those age cars, what you're going to see is that the average age, if you happen to notice, and you don't even need to unless you want to, if you did notice what the average age of those 5 cars in that list, they'll get younger and younger and younger and younger. And you won't have many, if any, age cars at all. These are your age cars. You are now going to deal with them sooner rather than later, and for the reasons we've already agreed, you'll have been wealthier and wiser for having done that. But the second thing I'll stake my reputation on is really an important one. This is the great one. The profits in your used car department will soar. They'll soar. How could they not? I mean, it's these old cars, it's these poor investment cars that get old that we eventually have to get rid of, are what pulls our profits down. Well, when we get rid of them earlier, yes, they might come with some pain, but they're going to come less pain early rather than later. So how could your profits not soar? So what I'm going to challenge you to do, without stopping managing age, okay, because we're not ready yet, what I'm going to challenge you to do is start managing your inventory as an investment. Manage that department first and foremost to make money. And you see, therein lies the opportunity for our future. We are all, in my opinion, because I don't know any other way, we're going to have to learn to make money as our #1 priority, not to sell cars, but to make money. Yes, you are going to have to sell as many cars as possible, but at the same time, we're going to have to start making decisions that recognize the reality that there simply isn't or won't be enough margin that we can just simply sell cars and make enough money. We're going to have to sell as many cars as we can, but we're also going to have to learn how to make money, not just with cars, but make money with money, knowing that the challenge for us to do that is it creates conflict. Creates conflict. To ask you to act like a good money manager, get rid of those 5 cars early, regardless if they're even fresh, it's going to say, wait a minute, we don't do that. That's not what good car practice says we do. Therein lies the problem, the challenge. But I'm going to tell you something. It's what we need to do. I'll say it one last time. We are running out of time to believe that we can make the type of return we need to make by simply selling these cars with ever less margin. Because there is some natural limit to life. We're going to have to learn to sell as many of them as we can, but we're also going to have to learn how to make money with them. So that's what I would do instead of managing the age of my inventory. I would manage the investment quality of my inventory in the manner that I said. So there you have that 4th condition. So the first of the 4 conditions that I started out saying to you are our responsibilities, professional owners, operators, and managers of used vehicle businesses, is to create and maintain inventory at all times that possesses the lowest possible market day supply, create and maintain inventory at all times that possesses rational pricing, create and maintain inventory at all times that possesses the maximum spread between what we own it for and what they're likely to be sold for, and then 4th and finally, our responsibility to create and maintain inventory that possesses not the right age profile, but the right investment quality. And if you are able to do that, it guarantees you of nothing. You still have to do a whole lot of other things right? You know, the blocking and the tackling, the advertising and merchandising. But if you are doing that, it takes you, I'm telling you, 85% of the way there. Now what you have done is you've understood this rational market. You've understood how it works. And you've positioned yourself in such a way where it is much more likely to favor you with positive results than work against you with negative results. So finally, I just want to say that it's been a privilege. You guys, many of you, in one way or another, pay us an awful lot of money at Cox Money. It's not lost on me, it's not lost on anyone else. And I just want to close by sharing this with you. We are really big companies, you know. and we are an imperfect company. In many respects, we're an imperfect company. I would not work a day, not a moment of a day, for this company if I didn't know that they understood their imperfections, if they did not understand that their success, our success at Cox Automotive, has to be secondary to your success. I mean, if we think that we're going to win as the #1 priority over you, it's going to be a short road. And this company, Cox, whether you recognize it or not, has been around for about 120 years. And it's a company that truly does have good value. And the most important value that they have is recognizing that we don't win until and unless you win. I wouldn't work here a day if I didn't know that that actually was our belief system. And we are an imperfect company, so I'm not saying that in every aspect, every day, we act in accordance with that. But what I am telling you is I want you to know that, and if and when we present ourselves to you in a manner that's not consistent with that belief system, you need to escalate that issue to these people who are here and or me at any time, on any front, and we will hear you, and we will do the right thing. We will do the right thing. And I really want you to know that, because our success depends on your success. So I'm deeply grateful and appreciative for your business, and I'm certainly deeply appreciative for your time today and your friendship and your support. So thank you very much.
Just 2 more minutes. Number one, thank you, Dale, for coming into our market and providing such great insight. There is lunch right out these doors, right there. I did want to recognize something that he said about Cox Automotive, and I obviously appreciate that. But if I could just have the team that's here just stand up, because these folks are out in the market and they're there to actually help you do exactly what Dale said, which is to make money. So, Karen Cassidy, Mike Principato, Blake Coop, we have Jen Silva in the back, John Carson, Jackie Grillo, Mike Balsam way in the back. So, when you see these folks in your stores, we're there for one reason, and that's to help you maximize the profitability on the cars that you have. So, that's what we're all about. We asked that there's a little bowl over there. Hopefully you put your cards in. So we're going to draw 6 names, 6 cards out of there. You will be the recipient of a 20-pack of spotlights, right? For your appreciation for coming in. Who likes spotlights? A big thank you to Holly. So Holly, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. Thank you everybody for coming. I know your time in the dealership is valuable. We're getting close to the end of the month, but I hope everyone walks away with some information that we can really implement within the stores. And, you know, as Ed said, and Dale, you know, as a corporation, as a company, we are here to support you guys. You know, we roll up our sleeve, we get into your business, we like to be the objective set of eyes to help you with all of these objectives that you have and challenges in the marketplace. We see them and we hear them. So thank you guys so much for coming. I've got parking passes for everybody, so I'm going to be walking around with parking passes. But please, stay for lunch and enjoy.
So-
if you have any questions for any of us, feel free to answer.
Right. So if you need a parking pass in the middle, John is going to hook you up here. Holly will do the same on this side. All right. So who needs one here? And then we can go right out these doors for lunch.
Yeah.
Hey, how are you? Hey,